This is why we go to therapy. Why? Because we have very different styles of communicating. And you're just like, why don't you just answer? And I'm like, I need time to process. This is We Don't Always Agree, the podcast where we thrive on hard conversations. I'm Ryan Michelle Bethay.
And I'm Sterling K. Brown.
We said I do almost 20 years ago. And two things about us, we love each other deeply and we can disagree deeply about a lot of things.
This is true, but we've been learning how to disagree healthily. And this show is our way of pulling back the curtain and sharing our evolution with you. Bird, is you ready?
Child, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Let's go, big dog. We Don't Always Agree is recorded at the Blackbird House flagship in Culver City, California. Let's do this. Yo, you ready, Bird?
Yes, I'm ready.
You know what we're talking about today?
I do.
We're talking about talking.
And I know I need to communicate.
We're talking about communication. What's wrong? You look good. What's wrong? You trying to show more shoulder?
No, it's a whole situation over here.
Are you comfortable?
I am not.
If you're not comfortable
in my skin.
What do you need to do to
cozy
be comfortable?
with who I am. I'm cozy.
You're such a strange person. Because we're talking about communication.
That's why.
So I want you to be comfortable.
That leads us right into communication is key, right? But how does one communicate? I'm sorry. When I think about Beyonce, I can't. I have to I need to be. I need to my factory settings.
This is episode 2.
Reset.
Here we go. It's gonna be a long season.
As long as I don't think about Beyonce.
What do you want to say about communication?
I would like to start here.
Okay.
Sterling.
Ryan.
If you had to define it, what kind of communicator are you? How
do you
communicate?
I think that I think I'm a deep thinker. You are a Negro. I almost called you something else. This is episode 2. Do you disagree? You suck, bro.
Deep thoughts with Jack Candy. Yes, you are a deep thinker. We can run that back. Go ahead.
No, run shit back. I want the world to see how you treat me on a regular basis. This is what I want. Hey, listen. You know me. I'm always see anything I say now.
No,
you're going to
sorry.
lambast.
I'm not going to lambast.
You
anything.
totally are.
There's no lambing or basting.
It is. I know, because you know what it is. I already knew what I was about to say, and then I stopped myself from saying it because I was like, she's about to clown.
I'm not going to clown.
Watch this, guys. Watch this. I think that the primary purpose in life is to become the next best version of yourself, right?
I would agree.
So evolution is, basically what we're talking about. And you have to be able to understand your past to be able to sort of deal with your present so you can create the future that you want. You didn't make fun of me. Okay, I appreciate that. That was really good. So I ask lots of questions. You suck. Yeah, I ask lots of questions of myself and the people around me because I think in a very sort of Socratic way, we get to a deeper understanding of why we make the choices that we make. So I ask questions, like all the time, like almost to the point that you are annoyed by. Like I think my level of inquisitiveness, oftentimes we'll leave like a party and you'll tell me something about somebody and I'll be like, oh, did you ask him this? And you're like, no. I'm like, how you leave that on the table? Like, felt like the natural sort of thing to do. I think that and we're at odds at this, right?
Very
because
you
so. Don't ask as many questions. You often tell me that you ask stupid questions, Sterling, which we always learned in school was not true. But according to Ryan Michelle Bethay, there are plenty of stupid questions that someone can ask.
First of all, I have not said that in a long time.
Have you said it?
In the entire time that I've known you, yes. I have said that there's a stupid question. In the entire time that I've known you, sure.
She agreed.
Since we've had children, no.
Not true.
That is true.
If I ask for directions, go ahead and tell them. This is where the masculine energy of Ryan Michelle Bethay and the feminine, because Brown is like, if I'm lost, I'm going to ask somebody where to go. And you are what? Yeah.
Here's the thing.
Let's do it.
Here's the thing.
Qualify.
Here's the thing.
Equivocate.
First of all.
Yes, ma'am.
You will ask anybody directions anywhere, anytime. The safety has nothing. We remember when we drove across country
Mm-hmm.
and you pulled over in the middle of West Texas and you just you randomly walked up to the guy. I was like, Sterling, we're at a Klan rally. We should probably keep driving. And you were like, oh, it's going to be fine.
You sound like the Chappelle joke.
Sure enough.
Where the white guy walks up to the police officer and goes, excuse me, officer, I'm a little high.
So that's first of all. Second of all, I will take responsibility for the fact that I do not like it when you ask for directions because I always know where I'm going. And I take it as a personal offense.
Why would you do that? Like, first of all, you don't always know where you're going.
I do.
No, you don't.
I do. I have an excellent sense of direction.
You have an excellent sense of direction.
But
you have no problems with meandering. And people are trying to get somewhere on
I don't meander. But the reason why I always know where I'm going and the reason why I have an excellent sense of direction and the reason why I always know where I'm going is because every once in a while, if I take a wrong turn, what does it do? It clicks into my brain and it gives me a 3D map of where I'm going. You never know where you're going.
Talk about what kind of communicator you are. Let's
I think I'm direct.
Okay. Well, define that directness.
When I know my directions. That's how I define direct.
Tell me why the questions, like, because we have a different sort of thing with regards to the questions. Why do they sort of trigger things with you sometimes?
Sometimes you'll ask me questions and I'll be like, I don't know. And you're like, well, if you did know, what would you say?
Because you don't engage, man.
I am engaging.
I do engage. Like, you engage like our son, Andrew. And I'll be like, hey, I try to make like an open-ended sort of invitation for a dialogue. And you're like, I don't know, Sterling. That's a good question. Like, well, nigga, if it's a good question, why don't you try answering it?
Why I gotta be N-word? Why I gotta be N-word?
Why don't you try
You can say ninja. I try, but this is why we go to therapy. Why? Because we have very different styles of communicating. And you're just like, why don't you just answer? And I'm like, I need time to process. And oftentimes, and here's the thing. Here's the thing I feel in our relationship. You oftentimes expect me to be able to answer right in the moment. And you think that I'm just not answering because I don't want to answer. And you don't understand that I am processing, but it sometimes takes me a minute to process. And I have learned over the years that if I say something, it typically gets lodged in your brain as how it is and the truth. And I don't always feel like there's room for that to not be true or how it is. Like if I say that's a stupid question in the heat of the moment 15 years ago, you're like, you said it once, so therefore.
You shouldn't be accountable for your words.
My God.
That's it? You should just be able to say whatever you want to say and be like, wow.
Can we just.
Because I try to let my words, be reflective of what I feel and think.
And then when I want to do that, you say, "Oh, why are you taking so long?"
So let me ask you a question. Because
that makes no sense.
I will give you this. I will give you. It takes you more time to process. That's fair. You never say like, "Hey, you remember that question you asked me, Brian? I've been thinking about it, and I have a response." Because that's why I push. Because if I don't get it from you, you don't give me nothing. Nothing. You don't ever be like, hey, that was a good question. Brown, thanks for giving me the time. Has that happened in the history of our relationship?
Yes. In the history of our relationship, yeah. You can do all the little shenanigans. I don't even know what this is. But yes, in the history of our relationship, that has happened. I don't know how often, but I know it's happened at least once. You said once in the history of our relationship. And I am saying, yes, it has happened once in the history of our relationship.
But so the reason why, if it has happened at least once, right? The reason why I try to get something in the moment is because it doesn't happen with great frequency.
I think it happens with a great deal more frequency. John, you really don't remember like the times recently where I've been like, okay, even with like, I said I wasn't upset, but I've processed and I realized this is what was going on. And like I've thought about it. And instead of just being upset in the moment and saying something, I've gone and I've processed and this is why. And I use I statements and blah, blah, blah. Are you saying that never happens?
I'm not saying that.
And that is why we go to therapy to help us become the great
Better
communicators that we
What do you think?
obviously are.
How do you think therapy, how specifically do you think therapy has helped us in our relationship?
We haven't killed each other.
Amen.
So
We can agree on that.
therapy has helped us not kill each other.
I'm still standing. I'm still strong. How to continue? Continue. What else?
That's all I got, because you were driving me up the wall. What is wrong with you?
I'll say this. Clearly, as what's happening right now, there are times in which we sort of miss each other. Like, I think I'm saying one thing that should be received in a particular way. You think you're saying something that should be received in a particular way, and there's like a disconnect. And every once in a while, you need a referee. You need like an impartial third party who is invested in your relationship and the success thereof.
Right.
Not of one person winning or somebody else winning, but like the success of the relationship, right? That can sort of be like, hey, this is where you guys are missing each other. This is what I think what Sterling meant. I think what Ryan meant. And you can sort of be like, huh, that's good. I think it has saved the relation.
I also think that one thing the one thing we have in common is that I think both of us like things to be named. So if we can name each other as, here's what's happening. You have a communication style called.
Yeah.
And you are you are a relational type of person, and you are goal oriented. And
which is what our therapist first told us
we had
when
a therapist
got together.
Yes.
Ryan is a very goal-oriented individual in terms of communicating. I guess that means that she's trying to always get something done. Like once Ryan starts a task, if you interrupt that task, it's like, yo, I'm trying to handle business over here. Where me, you can interrupt me with anything if you want to have like a personal connection. It's like, hey, you have time to talk about something? I'm like,
not football.
Hey, with a DVR, I'll pause a football game in a heartbeat. I will. I truly will. This is why I record all the games, honestly, because they take 3 hours to watch. But with the DVR, I get through that shit in like an hour, 45 minutes, so I can talk to other people. I'm completely serious, man. So I'm saying like that, and so it was very good for us to be able to label it, because I'm like, all right, I see Ryan is doing something. But then it's like hard for me to define what doing something is. It's like, you're reading a book. Like, you're very serious. Like, you're reading your book, and I'm like, hey, can I ask you a question? Yes, Sterling, what is it? I'm like, nigga, I thought you were just reading the book. You can come back to the book. You know what I mean? I just had a quick question.
Okay, so a lot of what we're talking, we're talking about two different things. One thing is therapy and how therapy has helped us. But the other thing is what a lot of women and wives have defined as the invisible labor of what it is to be the mother and the wife in a relationship.
I also want to point that like the traditional like division of labor is not one that is being like represented in our household. So, but go ahead. I'm going to listen. Please.
When you are the one who has to hold a lot of things in your brain about the other people in your household, it is called invisible labor. For instance, the person who remembers when people have to go to the dentist, when people have to go to the doctor, when people have to have their checkups, when people have to, when things are due for this date, when things are due on that date, how to sign the kids up for this. And then in order to sign the kids up for this thing has to happen. And if that thing happens, then how, like, generally speaking, the wife/mother in a relationship has to be several steps ahead, right? And so oftentimes in our relationship currently, when you interrupt a thought, or when you interrupt me reading a book, or when you interrupt these things, I think what you sense is the frustration that I feel like I have, because I don't feel like I ever get the free time that you get in terms of the being able to just kind of like live in my head or live in your head. And I think on this issue, a lot of women are going to have my back on this in terms of even if it's the division of labor and all of those things. But I would say that the division of labor hasn't always been that way, especially when our children were very, very small. I think things have shifted now especially because Andrew does soccer and you love soccer, you'll jump up and take him to the soccer game in a heartbeat. Take him to this. Like, you've got all of that because you enjoy that. You enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of what it takes to like plan the events, plan the birthday parties. We have our youngest son loves a birthday party.
He does.
That planning is by default on me. And again, all the other things, like it's a ticker tape parade for women in relationships, especially when there are children. As our children have gotten older, I will say that I have done a lot to try to get over what I felt was the immediate, when they are born, typically speaking, the woman does the lion's share of the work, typically speaking. And I have admitted to being very bitter about the fact that I felt like I was immediately thrust into this role of it's all on me. It felt very much all on me. And you were like, well, I mean, I can't nurse. I can't have the baby. I mean, it kind of is on you. But I'm doing other things. Like, see how well I take care of myself? So if you die, I'm gonna be fine. So you ain't got to worry. I mean, I'm doing this for you, baby. I'm in the gym for you, baby. Like, I mean, and that's how it went down.
Nobody said I'm in the gym for you, baby. Like they said that. Nobody ever said that. Continue. I'm listening. You're making good points.
And so that,
good points,
and it's interesting because we haven't necessarily gone to therapy about this, but what has allowed me to get space around all of this and to sort of identify these things is the fact that we have been in therapy, and that third person allows the both of us to name things so that it doesn't become so personal. It doesn't become, oftentimes our therapist will say, okay, what you're dealing with is very typical of blah, 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 blah. And it's not specific to you. It feels deeply personal and it feels very specific to you, but it's not. What you're responding from is a place of X, Y, and Z. And you're responding from a place of X, Y, and Z, which also feels deeply personal, but it's not. So if we can I feel like therapy gives us that sort of like step. You know, it's like when you think that you're the only one who's afraid of the dark when you're a kid, and then you find out other people are afraid of the dark, and you're somehow not as afraid of the dark because part of the fear is feeling like you're alone in this fear.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I feel like what therapy does is, because these therapists have such a vast knowledge of human behavior and human,
allows you to know
that you're not alone, and it can name the thing and not just you're weird, you have a neurosis. It's named as, oh, this is called, again, being a relational person. This is called being goal oriented, and here's how you can step out of those, what you think of as yourself, and try on someone else's mode of being and behavior.
Talk to me about this interesting difference that we have with regards to therapy and the important conversations that we have in our life. Because for me, therapy, I think, is the beginning of a conversation that needs to transpire for us. For you, I think, therapy is the place where important conversations transpire. And outside of therapy, you don't want to talk about it. Yes, no?
Yes, very much so. We agree in that disagreement, because you don't, like, we agree that
that's how we deal with it, but we don't agree that that's the way that it should be done.
Right.
Correct.
Because I feel like, I believe that especially when it's something that's very sensitive, if it's a topic that's sensitive or something that is happening right then in the moment, I believe that it's better to do it in therapy, because I feel like I get my mind right. And I feel like I can say things because I know that person, our therapist, is never going to let it get too bad. They're always going to step in and redirect. They're always going to step in and say, I feel like everybody's getting, a little. And I also will admit to this, which I've just discovered in the moment, is that I'm on my best behavior too.
Damn straight.
Yes. And you prefer me when I'm on my best behavior.
But I don't know why you can't. It's like being in church. Like, for me, it's like, you're just going to act good for 1 hour on Sunday. Like, why don't you take that example and try to model it in other facets of your life?
Sterling, with all due respect, sometimes you get on my nerves and just don't have the energy and the patience that it takes to have
I
these conversations.
I get on your nerves?
See?
Child, please.
See?
Child, please.
See?
Two things, because what you're experiencing, I want to try to illuminate the flip of it. To have something very important and to make some headway in therapy feels good. And then to leave it like to not follow up, to not sort of like continue that feels like we're starting over again. Like it doesn't feel like there's a continuation from one session to the next if there's been nothing that's transpired in between.
But you can also see it as we get to a place and then you and I mess it all up and argue because...
So here's the thing.
And then we get back to therapy and that's how we have to go back to ground zero.
And you let me know how you feel on this one because we may agree on this. I feel like when we go a long period of time about like not talking about something that's important, that's way worse than arguing. Come on now.
I might begrudgingly agree with you on that.
because I think what we've learned and what I'm trying to always get to is like that silence can be such a like deafening gulf that's way harder to like transverse than an argument. Like an argument feels like an argument is engagement. Like at least folks are still like connected and working on something, even if it's not harmonious. I feel like silence is the worst thing that you can introduce and make comfortable in a marriage.
Well, we should ask the therapist.
Well, let's do that. Who
no, I would agree that at this point, but I feel like what therapy has allowed us to do is the language for me to say, yes, you are right. And
sure,
can we give it a minute to let this breathe so that our argument is constructive
I'm with
as
that.
Opposed to destructive
I'm with
or
that.
destructive.
What it feels like oftentimes in the moment is like, I don't have time for that and I'm not going to make time for that because it rarely comes back. Do you feel me on that?
I don't think it. I don't. No, because I don't think it. Okay, I statement.
I'm
Say
telling
I
you
statement.
how it feels.
Okay.
Right? Like it feels like, why are you asking me this? Because like it seems like an innocuous sort of thing from your perspective, but I'm actually trying to get to something deeper. Like the question is a gateway. You know the way that people talk about other drugs or whatever. Like the question is a gateway to get to a deeper level of conversation. But you're like, you're asking a dumb question I don't have time for. So it feels like I don't have time for you, and what you think is important is not important to me.
Okay, I will say three things. The first thing I'm going to say is, I don't want you to feel that way.
Thank you.
So we'll work on that.
Deal.
The second thing I will say is that it feels like, I feel like you have a lot of room and space to think and to breathe and to sort of pontificate. And then it feels like you come to me with these huge and important questions from your space, from your office, into the room where everybody else is. And it feels like I'm the one who's been engaging with the kids and with this and that and this and that. And I'm on the phone 9 times out of 10. I'm on one of 17 different chats for one of the 2 children and their 17 different sports. And you don't see, because again, I want to circle back to the invisible labor.
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of this invisible labor, right? And then you stroll in and say, remember when we were talking about that thing? I had a thought. And in that moment,
you think the question is coming from a place of privilege from me, is what you mean?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I feel that. I feel that way.
Good.
The third thing I want to say is clearly, even after all of these years, clearly, Sterling, we don't have it completely figured out. But the good thing is that it illuminates the fact that we are 2 very, very, very different people.
Yes, we are.
Who are still trying to develop something in the middle that works for both of us.
I don't think it stops.
I don't think it stops.
There's no magical autopilot button that you just get a chance. It requires constant attention and nurturing, because people continue to grow and evolve. And if you're not careful, you can grow and evolve like that.
And would you agree that therapy has been one of the keys to us growing like this and has been a godsend in our relationship? Would you agree with that?
For shizzle.
And would you agree that both parties have to be willing to do that work?
Absolutely.
All right.
And we've been willing to do it.
To recap all of that.
Bring it in. Bring it home.
This is clearly a work in progress and clearly a discovery and discussion in progress. But we do not agree that Sterling believes that therapy is where you begin these challenging conversations. Yeah. And I feel like therapy is a box to contain those challenging conversations.
I'm right. For sure. Like, I think, y'all know I'm right.
I don't think we should ask a therapist. And we agree that therapy has allowed us to even grow as much as we. I feel so bad. I feel like we were like, and then. Anyway, but whatever therapy we have, we whatever communication styles we have that do meet or do mesh, we could agree that therapy is the reason why we've even been able to find this kind of
complete and
ground.
Total godsend, for sure.
And we agree that communication evolves over time. Do we agree?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will say this much. I feel like the way in which we argued earlier in our marriage, I felt unfair, and it was volatile on both party sides in certain ways. And like it become petulant and strange. I think we've set some ground rules that allow for people to walk away from things without their feelings being just like hurt. Like people feeling like intentional things have been done to them. I think like people have learned how to fight fairer. Maybe not always completely fair, but I think it's way fairer now than 18 years ago.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And so, yay, another thing we agree on. We have decided to have a conversation with an actual licensed therapist about this, right? Her name is Keandra Jackson.
I like the sister a
and
lot,
she's actually a licensed marriage and family therapist, which I think we should delineate exactly what she does. And she's doing big things in the mental health and wellness space, which we also very much agree on. Yep. And she is not our personal therapist because we thought that would be just a little bit too weird for you, me, our therapist, and all of you all to meet her, because she'd be like, she probably
y'all want to show everybody? Y'all want to show everybody all this?
But anyway, so please don't go away, because I think it's really important for people to actually like to have a conversation with our guests to sort of in real time delineate some of these things that we've been talking about.
We will be right back with more. We don't always agree.
You were beautiful, just like a flower.
Okay, everyone, are we? I'm ready. Are you ready?
I don't know. We're going to find out real quick. We got a guest.
But we are very excited about our guest. Keandra Jackson is a trusted, licensed, and I really want to stress the fact that she's licensed, because I think it's important to give people their flowers when it comes to the credentials that they have achieved. So she is licensed, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and founder of the LA SoCal-based practice KW Couples Therapy.
Nice.
And is a TV personality.
Come on.
Who has appeared on OWN Network's Love Goals. Am I right?
That is correct.
Got it right? Okay,
you did get it right.
Okay, great.
And she is here to help us discuss communication and how to communicate effectively.
One of the things that's become a sticking point in the past maybe 18 months or 2 years with us is that I feel like therapy is, I would call it like more of a sacred space. And like, that is for me. That's where I'm like, okay, I know that there's going to be someone there. I'm safe. I can say what I need to say. They're not going to let me get too far. They're not going to let him get too far. And things are going to come up in a way that it's going to land gently on him and it's going to land gently on me. And then that's where it kind of not begins and ends, but it's almost like if you're watching a TV show, like to be continued, right?
Gotcha.
And then we pick up and it's like on the last therapy with Sterling, right? And Sterling feels
feels like it is the place to begin a conversation with someone, because sometimes we've been missing each other or whatnot. And so we're able to begin something with someone who puts us on the right track, and that we could possibly take the baton and sort of continue that conversation on our own until we next get a chance to be with our therapist.
Yeah.
So we are asking you for your professional opinion about that. Assuming that there are other people who have that kind of like approach to therapy, or even just maybe different approaches to therapy. So how would you lead us into a conversation about that and how to find a happy medium?
Yeah, so I believe that two things can coexist at the same time.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't have to be, I'm big on both and, not either or.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
Okay.
So it can be a place where you guys are having conversation and starting them, but it also can be a place where it's just like, it is a little the place to have the conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had couples come into my office and they're like, we waited all week to have this conversation because we knew having this conversation on our own would get too heated.
Yeah.
We're not going to have any type of resolve. So we needed a mediator. We needed you to be in the middle of this.
Sure.
And then I've also had other people who are like, you know what, Keandra, we want to start this conversation here.
Yeah.
But I also am kind of, I don't want to call nitpicky, but I am kind of like a therapist who really focuses in on some of the things that a lot of people don't really see themselves. Like, that's part of my job, right? To bring up things that I see with the couples and stuff in order for them to kind of get that new revelation. And so sometimes I'll bring up a topic that they weren't even thinking about.
Right.
And then it's the start
Sure.
of a conversation that needs to be had at home.
Yeah.
You know? So it can go both ways. I don't see that it has to be either or. And I don't think it's a right or a wrong way. I think it's just really based on the couple. What can you handle? That's really the question.
What can you
Because if
handle?
there's going to be a resolve, or at least a push towards a resolve, or getting to a place of agreement, then you guys can probably handle that on your own.
I got to follow up,
You know?
if you don't mind.
Go
I
for
think
it.
you may feel me on this one, because sometimes I think both of us have different levels of comfort with silence, possibly, with regards to, like, so for Rye, it's like, all right, we had that conversation. I'm good till whenever the next time is that we go to therapy. And I'm like, I felt like we made some real headway, and now we're just sort of like treating it like it disappeared, like it went away. And so, like, do you have any sort of recommendations in bridging that gap? Because it's like the silence for me feels really loud, and like, how are we just ignoring this thing that's still a thing? Like, we haven't reached any sort of resolve on it. But for her, it's like, I'd rather silence than something going south or sideways. Where I was like, I don't mind something going somewhere as long as we're just doing it together. Yeah.
Yeah. I also feel like, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, that just really speaks to you guys' communication styles. And what I've learned and what I've seen with a lot of people that I've worked with is that it really is a balance of how you handle your emotions. Some people can't have those conversations right then and there because it gets too intense. They get too angry. They get too much of an attitude.
Yeah.
You was taking too much of a deep breath on that one.
No. It's what she said herself. She said that she feels like she will get too worked up in the moment, and that it's safer for her to just wait till someone else is observing. Because she even says, and I'm sure you've probably witnessed this, that people tend to be on their best behavior with their therapist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then they act a pure fool, not in my presence. And then when I say, what really happened this week? You know, and then it's finally like, okay, fine. We haven't been talking all week, and this is our first conversation in your presence, you know? So they typically are on their best behavior, but it's like, why do that when you're paying me the big bucks? You know, it's like, this is the time to be raw and real and to get through what you need to get through. Like, this is a place of safety, you know, like, it's confidential. Whatever stays here, happens here, stays here. So this is the time to really get it out, right? Don't think like, oh, I got to protect my therapist, because that's a whole different ballgame that you don't even have to do.
So I have had some moments in my life that I am not proud of.
What had
that
happened?
used to happen a lot more.
Your sweater
where
Baby, go ahead. Continue.
where like, not to get into the weeds about it, but like, for instance, most recently it happened, and I was actually surprised because it hasn't happened a lot, and I tried not to do it, especially now that I have
At the
kids.
kids' football game?
At the kids' football game. There was a lot. Tensions were high, and I have decided I have usually, and I'm not saying this to be funny, but I usually take a lot of CBD oil before their games.
Rub it in.
Because
Rub that shit
no, I
in.
do. I take
You
it
do.
and then I rub it on temples because
Come on,
I
girl.
get very heated. And I think it's because I used to see my mom do, like, my mother would go off in she would go off, and I remember all the time, and it would embarrass me, and I never wanted to do that to my kids. And And I feel like I do sometimes. So I try really hard in spaces like that. And I went off on this man. I went up one side, down the other.
Yeah.
And I try not to do
And
that.
somebody said, "Hey, bro, is that your wife?" And I was like, "Oh God, what's going on?" I ran across her. "Hey, what's going on, Bird? How you doing, Scott?"
And I was mid, keep my husband's name out your mouth before I have to take it out. And don't think, and he's bigger than me. He's like, man. I was like, don't man me. Don't man. I mean, it was bad. And I have that side of me. And there have been times when he's seen that side of me.
For sure.
And so for me, as someone who has really tried to regulate.
I don't think you're that person with me anymore.
But because I don't do it. Because when you want to like have these conversations, I'm like, maybe we should wait.
Going back to that managing your emotions, that's really the name of the game. So if you learn some coping techniques, if you learn how to take them deep breaths that Sterling keep doing in this episode,
it's all through life.
But also to getting to the root of why you get that way. You just talked about how you saw your mom.
Come on now.
Get angry and get real turned up, right? And so we don't realize too that we learn vicariously. We see our parents go through things and do things and we pick up on that, right? Whether that's consciously or subconsciously. And then we kind of just go through life and we kind of are doing the same things.
Yeah.
Like oftentimes we either want to be completely opposite of our parents or we want to be just like them. And depending on what kind of parents you've picked up things along the way. Like I've picked up things from my parents and I'm like, bruh, ain't no way.
Yeah.
This is stopping here. I'm breaking this generational cycle, this pattern. Like it cannot go on. But what I love about what you said is that you're trying.
Amen.
Like it's beautiful to see someone who's actually doing the work. It's one thing to be mad and angry and turned up and you don't want to do nothing about it. Then we will be having a different conversation.
Right.
I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, good job.
Let us ask,
you.
in terms of like communication being key, what aspects of communication should be prioritized? In terms of tone or like when conversations should transpire? Like what do we need to like get granular about in terms of communication?
That's so good. I think for me, the main thing that I would tell people is timing. The topic, anything else does not really matter if you are approaching this conversation at the wrong day and at the wrong time. If I just worked a 16-hour shift and I came home and I'm hungry and I'm tired and I want to shower.
Yeah, you work a lot.
And I'm hangry. Not hungry, hangry.
Yes.
This ain't the time to really have that deep conversation. You know what I mean? Let me decompress. Let me have a moment, So I think addressing the timing of when conversations need to be had is super important. And you can even check in. You can say like, hey, I want to talk to you about something, but is now a good time for you?
Sure.
And then you have the capacity for them to be like, yeah, or no.
What is it for you, Robert? Is it a situation of like, we should set a time up like for like on the calendar or just like a check-in? Like
it's so beautiful that you said that because maybe instead of it, we can have our cake and eat it too, in the sense that maybe we say, okay, I send a text. Hey, listen, something's been on my mind. Can we find time today? It doesn't have to be set up in the calendar. But if I get that heads up that I feel like therapy gives me, which is like, okay, girl, get your mind right. Like, it's almost like sometimes I feel like a cat that gets startled, when I'm not and it's when I say best behavior, I don't mean best behavior. I mean like best self in a way. Like not like I'm like, Keandra, what I was thinking was when Sterling did that, I felt a little bit.
You're not being fake.
I'm not being fake, but it's also like I want to be my most constructive self.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? And like I said, I know I have this side of me that can pop off and be like, you know what I said about stupid questions? I was right. It is a dumb question. And I don't want to do that.
Grabbing air.
Grabbing air. So maybe what we've discovered right now as a tool of communication is like send a note, send a text, like, hey, maybe not right now, but at some point today, can we circle back to this thing I want to talk about?
Yeah. And also it's timing, but also capacity. I do this with my family and friends too, right? It's not, do you have the time to talk about this right now? But do you also have the emotional capacity to handle what I'm about to say? Because there's a lot of times where I may be chilling watching cartoons and I do have some downtime, but I am so overwhelmed, either emotional, physically, or spiritually, that I can't take in anything extra. So timing and emotional capacity is an additional thing that I would add into this conversation.
I think the advice that you've given us is already going to be helpful, because what will happen...
Go ahead and send that invoice, girl.
What will happen from time to time is that we'll try to have a conversation. And I think we will both like agree on the conversation even. And I'll say something that Rye needs to deliberate on and is trying to figure out how to respond to. And it's interesting because as we're sitting there, and normally I sort of feel like the conversation is like, you know, like a game of ping pong. Somebody pop, 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 pop. And I'll pop the ball over to Ryan, and she just doesn't pop it back. And I think what you're saying is sometimes you're like, I need time to reflect so that I can respond in a thoughtful and considerate manner. And oftentimes it feels like, oh, she don't think what I got to say is important. Like she just not gonna say nothing back. I just put something huge out there. But the emotional capacity thing too is I probably need to be like, all right, the conversation could go in this direction. Is this something that you feel like we can address right now, or do we have to find another time in which the space feels right to talk? Because I'll admit, like, I feel ready.
All the time.
All the time. You want to talk about anything at any time, I will dive deep. I'm a pretty easy soul-bearing person, where the bird is a bit more protected. And she's like, I need a moment, Brown.
Do you ever say that you need a moment when you do? Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. But actually in the moment, what usually happens is you just go silent.
Yes, but yeah. I will say, I tell my kids all the time, what you ask is as important as when you ask. I said, because if you see mommy doing like 3 or 4 different things and you ask me the same thing twice in a row, the answer is going to be no. Simply because I cannot process what it is that you want, and I can't think through, you know, and I'm going to say no because I don't want you to come back and be like, you said yes. Because now I said yes to some ice cream and I didn't really want you to have the ice cream. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I tell them that all the time so that they can get what they want. I feel like you, because you're ready all the time, and sometimes I feel...
Go for it.
I feel like you feel...
I statements, you're doing good. They are in therapy for real, y'all. I statements. I see what you did there. I see you've been learning.
Thank you. I feel like your persistent and consistent state of emotional readiness feels like the norm, and everything else doesn't feel like... It feels like an aberration to the norm.
From my perspective, you mean?
Yeah.
I understand what you mean. That makes sense. I think, yeah. Yes. And I need to be sort of like conscientious of that like I am not the norm, right? Like that what's normal for me, the ability/desire. Like I feel like I'm in a constant checkoff play. Let's philosophize about what life will be like 200, 300 years from now, darling. I'll introduce like strange hypotheticals, and there's sort of a gateway to get to like a deeper understanding. Because I think what I find in our relationship is like, I'm always trying to figure out who you are. Like I'm always trying to figure, because you'll often tell me like, Sterling think he know, but he don't know. And I was like, oh, well, why don't you tell me? I'm trying to like get into that space.
That's beautiful though, because it's like he's always trying to learn the new version of who you're becoming. And there's so many couples who stopped doing that a long time ago after they start dating, right? It's like, who I married was who he was going to be, right? Not understanding that people grow, evolve, change so much, and you want to get to know that person, you know, as they grow. I think that that's beautiful, you know. But also, too, y'all got to come and meet in the middle somewhere.
Sure.
So that means there's going to be conversations where you're going to have to, Ryan, be very much a little bit more ready to be like, you know what? The last 50 conversations, we press pause. You know, I have to be a little bit more ready to have this conversation now in the moment. But then there's going to also have to be times for Sterling where he's like, you know what? I can have a conversation any and every.
Let me take my ass off
let me
bit.
pull back. Yeah, let me pull back on this one and give her a day or two to sleep on it, pray on it, or whatever. And give her that space to do so. So I think both of y'all got to do a little bend, you know.
Maybe we could also, like, literally, a thought and then 2 questions.
Go ahead.
First off, maybe you and I can figure out a way to actually make a literal safe space. Like, remember years ago, we discovered that we were both really good in the car?
Yeah.
Like, we discovered that we don't argue in the car. Like we find a way to, where you're talking about meet in the middle. For some reason, we do that in the car.
Captive audience.
The captive audience. And it's usually the one time when and because I cannot be on the phone in the car and I can't read in the car, because I get car sick. So I'm very much a captive audience in the car, especially if I'm a passenger. I'm not going to be on my phone, right? Or doing anything else. And I'm ready to talk. So maybe that can be something where it's like our code word could be you want to go for a drive. And all we have to do is literally either drive around the block or, sit in the car and drive it around the block and park it.
Okay.
And be like that could be something we could do. Yeah. The other thing, so my 2 questions are, one is, can you touch on a teensy bit because I just want to make sure I defined it, because we talked about this earlier, which is the invisible labor that women have to do, women and mothers, particularly women, wives have to do. Because I brought it up, and I oftentimes think that sometimes I feel like Sterling thinks I make things up.
You make it up.
Well, I did talk about it, and just for our audience and the people, I just think that that's something that we should.
Yeah, I do believe that that's definitely a real thing. I think I've seen an Instagram post where it's like, what you actually do versus what people see you doing versus what you really do as a mother, right? What people see is like, oh, you took the kids to school in the morning, but it's like, you don't know the 50 million things that I did, from waking them up to cooking breakfast to telling them no, to ironing their clothes, to tending to my husband, to cleaning, to, a million and one different things before you even get to that desired goal. And I think it adds that extra burden that people don't necessarily see with their eyes. They kind of just see the end result of that. And it's exhausting. And especially if you're a Black woman, that added layer of what that, even a Black man too, like if you're a parent and a person of color in general, it adds an extra layer of burden to you because you're also often hyper vigilant for things that other people may not be hyper vigilant on. Safety, you're triggered often, how people view you. You don't want to be seen as the angry Black woman at your kids' game, like all of these different perceptions. So I think it's a real thing that we have to be more honest about. And if we're not, then we're just like really sucking it up inside. And eventually it's going to blow up and explode. So agreed, it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. I didn't think that it wasn't a real thing.
I know, I was kind of, but I also wanted to just sort of put it out there for anybody who may be listening who's like, well, Brian said invisible, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't just that there was some cooperation from like I said, licensed. I am not licensed in this area.
It's a real thing. I do this thing with a lot of the couples that I've worked with when I tell them to actually, you probably heard this before, like schedule times to fight and to argue. So instead of you guys disagreeing in the moment, say y'all know Friday evenings, y'all got a little bit more chill time, y'all are more receptive, kids might be doing whatever that they want to do. Yeah. You can be like, you know what, let's table this to Friday. And then that's the day. Okay. Not to say that's our fight day, right, but that's the day and the moment where we're going to have all of the conversations that we need to have about our relationship. And it works effectively.
That sounds like it does.
Yeah. Like I remember I had a couple who would fight about their in-laws all the time, right? So they would go, say, for instance, we just came off the holidays, they would go to their parents, one of the parents' house, and it would be some drama there, right? Instead of arguing at this family event, they're like, on Thursday, we gonna talk about what your mama just told me, you know what I mean? And they found it to be so effective because it was like this designated time. And they went all in during that time. And when that time frame was up, they kind of went back to being lovey-dovey and all of those things. And so designating a time to fight might be something.
Like I think what Ryan and I have discovered, like you get a chance to choose each other every day. Yeah. Every day. Like it is an active thing, right? And the idea, if you're sitting back and just waiting for that feeling all the time, then your incentive to make the choice is like, I ain't feeling it. I ain't choosing. But when you realize that it's not a feeling, it's like, no, I have some agency in this thing. Yeah. I get to show love today, right? Like that's...
Yes. I love that.
Yes.
Right?
Like it is an opportunity. We are each other's opportunity to express affection, love, admiration, care, etc. Right? And it's even like the hardship parts, right? I think is the universe working out a way to be like, all right, here's an opportunity to grow in patience. Here's an opportunity to grow in kindness. And rather than seeing it as a problem, it's like, oh, look at what we get to do today. I get to do a podcast with the bird. It's very exciting. Let me ask you a couple more questions because we're running out of time and I want to run out completely.
I know.
Is there such thing as over-communicating? And specifically and overall, is there like a time to just be quiet? Or do you feel like something can always be discussed?
I read a study. This was a while ago, and I can't remember who performed the study, but it was a study that said only 2%, 1/2 of the United States population of adults know how to effectively communicate. That stuck with me. I could not let that thing go. So that means 98% of us think we know how to communicate, but we really don't. So this concept of over-communicating, I don't really know that's a thing because probably 98% of us are under-communicating because no one has ever really truly taught us, right? This isn't something I wish it was, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but I really think that communication should be a life skill that we teach people, kids, very early on in elementary, right? And so this idea of over-communicating, I don't know if that's like a real thing because when we think of over-communicating, we think of something being excessive or overly done.
Okay, enough.
He's
like,
rubbing
you
all the
are
back of the
really,
neck.
I'm like, Lord have mercy.
He want to be close and
He doesn't want to be
touching
close.
on
This is his way of communicating. I was right. Are you listening, bird?
He said he
I'm
won
trying
the
to
debate.
tell you.
No.
That's what that means.
No, let you cut it off. Let Keandra finish.
So yeah, I think this idea of over communicating it's not really a real thing.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people think that they're communicating and they're not. There's a difference between talking and communicating. We've all had conversations on the phone where you talking to somebody and they just yapping for 30 minutes and you ain't said a word.
Wow.
Are they really communicating with you?
Okay.
Right? That's a one-way conversation. A communication is effective two-way communication, right? So we need to get out of this idea of thinking that talking is communicating because it's a two-way street. So sharing thoughts, feelings, emotions, boundaries, having those conversations, and it being active listening.
Yeah.
Because we didn't talk about that today.
Right.
But active listening is a huge part of communication, right? And it's not just me listening to what you're saying or hearing what you're saying and, waiting for you to pause and then I can give my rebuttal. That's not what active listening is, right? It's taking in what the person is saying, understanding, and seeking to be understood.
Where can our
where can they find you? And are you obviously, if they wanted to call you up and say, we heard you and want to have you.
Starla is putting doves all on me right now.
Are you open to like the people off the street calling and saying,
the interesting thing is the last few years I've took a slight pivot.
Okay.
So I'm no longer seeing clients for individual and couples therapy.
Okay.
I'm choosing to take my knowledge and expertise to a wider audience.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
doing more media projects, more podcasts, more speaking engagements.
Yes.
And so I'm not available for therapy, even though I appreciate all of the people.
Yes.
But you can stay connected with me on all social media platforms at Keandra Jackson. Absolutely. I have tons of books that I have written.
Keandra Jackson at is it
KeandraJackson.com.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And then Keandra Jackson on all social media platforms.
Got it.
Yeah.
We'll drop that in the show notes for people.
Cool.
But do you have on your website a list of therapists that you would recommend?
I do not, but I am absolutely open to having people email me, and I am very happy to send out resources.
Okay, wonderful. Because I know that's something that people are always like, but I can't find nobody.
I know, all the time,
So
especially therapists of color. Like, that's a huge thing. I mean, we're literally only 4%.
Thank you for
Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
This is absolutely fantastic. We're going to let y'all go. We'll be right back with more. We don't always agree. Keandra Jackson was absolutely wonderful.
We agree that she's the best.
And we agree that I won therapy.
Oh, Jesus.
Which is pretty cool.
Jesus.
You want to tell them why we hot today? Tell them why we hot today. Come on now.
This is the part of the show.
Get sultry with it, yes.
So we may agree on it. We may disagree on it, but this is part of the show where we get really heated. We allow ourselves to get hot. This is our scheduled fight time.
This is our scheduled fight time.
But this is why I'm hot. We just pick a random topic. We got 2 minutes to see why Ryan is Ryan is
We're
right.
going to see why Ryan is right.
Okay, so today's topic, I'm just going to give it to you.
Go.
If you could read my mind and I could read your mind for just a day,
You could,
do you think it would strengthen or weaken the relationship, and why?
I'm going to go with weaken. And it sounds sort of like an interesting take. It's a hot take, but hear me out. I think it is more important that you/we share our minds with each other rather than me be able to read your mind. I think voluntarily sharing what you're going through is of much more value than me being able to know it. Although knowing it would be helpful, but I think in terms of like people coming together in a relationship, it is the sharing that's actually more important than the knowledge itself. Holla at your boy. Did I win that? I think I may have won that.
So, Bella and Edward
Bella,
fell madly in love.
Wait, Bella and Edward are the
Twilight.
Yeah.
And it was because
Take me to take them to the movies. Boy, that was
Edward could not read Bella's mind.
Huh?
And that made him want to get to know her. In addition to wanting to bite her and eat her and drink her blood and kill her. In addition to that part of it. So really, honestly, given everything we've talked about today, the irony is that I absolutely agree with you. I would say that it does not, and also minds are, people don't even know what's going on in their own mind. So if I had to walk through somebody else's, I think it would actually be horrifying, and I would probably end up like, again, to quote another book, I'd be like Neville Longbottom's parents.
Look at you. Up in St. Mungo?
In St. Mungo's.
Lord have mercy.
Shuffling around.
This is...
You know what? I don't care anymore.
Let's get out of here. I won.
Let's go.
I won.
You didn't win anything.
Everybody. Yo, we don't always agree with Ryan.
I think that's it. We don't always agree.
We'll see you next week. Please
Come back next week with this crazy man.
That's two people trying to figure it out. We can,
And I think
that was a good therapy session the other day.
No, because she'll send us an invoice.
Well,
we can rate and it was. Whether she sends us an invoice or not, you can afford it. And then we'll just rate, subscribe, comment, whatever on all the things. So don't miss the episode.
Next week.
What else am I supposed to say? Come back.
We don't always agree.
We don't always
That's
agree.
it. Is it good?
Okay, babe.
Go ahead and
Go.
vacuum your sweater.
Oh,
Jack.
Jesus.
Shit is mad furry. Mad furry.
Water.
Lot of mercy.
Minor.
We are.